2020. This is the Board of Education Policy Committee meeting. Can I have a motion to start the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Great. The primary purpose of the meeting on the agenda tonight is to discuss the new policy language for mascots. So I was going to ask if Mr. Bowden, if you wanted to review this with us, or Dr. Freeman, if you would like to present to us how you derived the language and what we're reviewing tonight.
Sure, I'll
Yes.
I'll defer to you, Paul, on that.
Yeah, so I'm happy to speak to it. So after the recent discussion that we had locally about the mascot, Mr. Bowden went and reviewed CABE recommendations and other districts to see if there was existing policy language around the adoption of mascots. We could not find any. It does not appear that any other school districts have a policy. So the language that you see in front of you is simply written by me on the heels of our most recent experience. And as I think about the fact that we are now moving into a process for identifying a new mascot moving forward, this was my first run. I think you've got about 5 sentences here. And so what I drafted was that the Board of Education recognizes the value afforded to school spirit and morale, please apologize my spelling error, through the practice of maintaining school mascots. The identification and adoption of a mascot shall be a decision made at the school level. To the degree practicable, the school community and student body shall have a significant voice and a large role in the selection and adoption of such mascots. School mascots shall be representations of animals, mythical creatures, inanimate objects, or colors. In no case shall a mascot be an individual human being, a group of human beings, a race of human beings, or a specific culture of human society. The Guilford Public School System shall not maintain a mascot at the district level. This policy shall not be interpreted as a requirement for all Guilford schools to maintain a mascot. Over the last several weeks, we have moved into the first round of what we were considering to be our process for identifying a new mascot at Guilford High School. Round 1 was simply an all call to all community members to make suggestions, to nominate ideas moving forward. We've received, well, as of yesterday afternoon, we have received 263 unique emails to the address that we have set up. I do want to note that while most of the suggestions are animals, mythical creatures, inanimate objects, or colors, there's a large contingent that is suggesting the Guilford Green moving forward. I do want to note that there's been a number that do represent humans, and it's interesting how the quarryman is a suggestion that has been made. There's been a suggestion, the sounders. I'm not exactly sure what a sounder is, but I think it might be a reference to a human person. So I don't know if this language is accurate. I don't know if it's complete. I don't know if it's the direction that the board wants to move, but it was my first attempt to give us a ballpark in the sort of direction that we wanted to move in, or that the board may want to move in. I certainly think that there's room for conversation. I do want the board to know that in the absence of an existing policy, the framework that Principal Chaff and I have laid out is that we expect to keep this call for nominations open to the community until approximately the end of July. Again, we've received over 260 suggestions so far. At that time, we will close the nomination process, and Principal Chaff plans on putting together a representative committee at the high school level, a committee that will include administrators, teachers, students, and parents to review the suggestions that have been made. The conversation that I've had with Principal Chaff is that we want to make sure three things really. One, we want to make sure that any of the suggestions that come through don't have underlying unintended meanings that could be misconstrued. The example that I would give, I know that the Yard Goats has turned into a popular mascot in Hartford, but when it was first rolled out, there was some concern, as in the Puerto Rican community, goat can have a negative connotation, especially when applied to a husband in a marriage relationship. So we, one, want to make sure that we're careful about unintended meanings associated with any of them. Two, we want to make sure that it is something that can be timeless. We want to make sure that this choice can last our community another 70 years or more. So the example that I use, and I hope it doesn't offend anybody, but I don't think we should select a Pokemon as our next mascot. I think it needs to be something that will have staying power, that would be timeless. And three, we want it to be something that everybody can rally around. I want to avoid a Bodie McBoatface situation. So the committee would vet all of the suggestions that came in, even just eyeballing it, and even with that vetting taking place, I think the first round of voting then is going to be a large slate. I think that there are 20 or 30 or more viable suggestions that are coming in. So I think that voting would probably take place in at least 2 rounds. We would put together the entire slate. We would ask students to rank their first, second, and third choices, applying a point value to each of those rankings. And then we would see what our top 3 or 5 or 10 options are, and then put that out again for a second round of final voting. And when we talk about students, I expect Principal Chaff and I are thinking that we're talking about current and future students at the high school. So we're thinking of opening up voting down to the 5th grade level through the 12th grade level. And so at the end of this process, we do feel that it is really involving the school and the community voice in several different ways. And in fact, this first round is open to anybody. Nobody's suggestion is being teased out because they're not a current or past student. I've seen alumni making suggestions, community members are making suggestions, faculty members who work in Guilford but have never lived or attended school in Guilford are making suggestions. And I think that's all a positive. And then again, the committee will vet, and ultimately the student body will vote probably on two levels. That's what we're thinking. That's the direction we're going. I just wanted to say that as long as everybody's comfortable with that process, we're in no rush to move this policy forward. In the absence of the policy, I fully intend on allowing Principal Chaff to keep moving forward on that. So I don't think we need to feel pressure to finalize a policy here. I do think that we want to make sure that we allow the 2-meeting cycle. If we come to conclusion tonight, we could have this at the August meeting, and then we would be finalizing it in September. We could actually have identified a new high school mascot before that time. If we want this policy in place, we could then sort of get it on tonight's agenda if we feel we've got it finalized, and we could act on it as soon as your next meeting.
Paul, I would assume all of our other schools in the district fit this criteria?
Yes, so if I can do this off the top of my head, Adams are the Raccoons, Baldwin are the Bulldogs, Cox are the Coyotes, Leet are the Cougars, Lakes are the Lions, and Jones are the Bumblebees. So yes, all of the other 6 are animals.
Great. And you had mentioned you reached out to CABE, but are there any other schools that have gone through a similar transition to GHS that would warrant maybe reaching out to see what kind of policy they put in place similar to
Yes.
this?
Yeah, we tried and we couldn't find any. The most recent version is Killingly, and it's one of the reasons that I think it's important to have a policy, because they changed it back, right? And so it's why I think it's important that this board does adopt a policy. Yep.
Yeah.
We couldn't find anything anywhere. And for
No.
what it's worth, the Washington Redskins announced this morning that they'll be changing theirs, and I've already been contacted by a sports reporter from NBC wanting to talk to us about how we are responding to the Washington decision. So I think it's going to be a continued conversation. Several districts in the state have reached out to me for our resources, our materials, and just to talk through what we just went through recently. There are still 16 in the state, I believe, who have Native American mascots behind
Yeah.
us now.
Glastonbury has the tomahawks, I believe it is, in Glastonbury, and there's already petitions going around on both sides of the argument in their community. So I think we'll be seeing a lot more districts kind of following what we've done.
Yeah, North
hopefully,
Haven
but-
too. Yeah.
North Haven and Farmington are both the Indians, just like we were. Yep, and there's a
Yeah.
number. So I think I know a number of them are having similar conversations. I don't anticipate that there will be much movement at the state level. There was some interest in something happening at the state level before COVID-19. I don't know that there will be interest, that there'll be interest at the state level, considering what's going on with COVID-19 right now.
I think the policy is good, Paul, how it's spelt out. Here's the only thing that sticks out to me that, I would hope others would, lend their suggestions to. I think it does a very good job saying what we shouldn't have, what we don't want, right? But I think the fact that it lists specific items that it should only be kind of pigeonholes us a little bit.
Too limiting, yep.
To maybe exclude something we're just not thinking of, or, that we, maybe there's a fantastic idea that fits the criteria, but isn't
Yep.
listed in the things that we're allowing for. And that's the
Mhm.
only thing that concerns me a little bit.
Right. Like when you said the sound, they're probably referring to the Long Island Sound, right?
Yes,
And
but I don't know
so-
exactly what a sounder is. Right.
And we might be making it up. This is what I'm thinking.
Yep.
Like, we may end up with something that, like the Guilford Green, like people may think it's the color, but it's actually, an iconic part of our community. So I think John's right that that was my only thought as we were talking about this is, are we getting a little ahead of ourselves only because we're still in the process of hearing from the community about the mascot? And I don't want to pigeonhole us into, like John said, some limitations.
I absolutely agree with that. My intention was trying not to write something that was only negative. So I usually hate to put out documents that are lists of thou shalt nots.
That's a fair
But
point.
in this case, John, I think you're right. And I think if that paragraph simply said school mascots shall not be, and then went to the list of things that we want to avoid, then, right.
Yeah.
And originally I wrote animals or mythical creatures, but then I was trying to go through schools in my head, and I said, well, Harvard are the Crimsons. So that,
Right.
so I added inanimate. I think Deerfield are the red doors, which I don't get, but that's where inanimate objects came from. Colors came, and in fact, there's a lot of suggestions for just the Guilford Green that has been suggested multiple times in the emails that I've looked at. So I'm happy to make that change. I just wanted to explain what I was trying to do. I think you're exactly right. I mean, we may be thinking of, I don't
Who
know.
knows, right? We don't know what we might be thinking of.
We
That's
don't
why
know what we're not thinking of.
I don't want to lose out on a valuable opportunity because
Yep.
we've written policy that says we can't include it.
And then I also, again, what I wanted to tease out by mentioning the quarrymen, is there a way to rephrase the sentence about people? I mean, should we just
Right,
take
group
out
of
a
human
group of
beings.
human beings? Should it say that it will not be an individual human being, right? I don't want to be the Jason Bowdens, that would be inappropriate. And we shouldn't be a race or culture of human beings. But if we leave groups in there, then it could still leave room for things like the Patriots or the
Mhm.
Quarrymen, or things that might
Right.
be. Now, and so again, I'm wondering if we take out group, because group is all encompassing. And so by taking that out, it just says we're not going to do cultures or ethnicities or individuals or races. Is that better?
What
if we
about,
were to make?
yeah, it's like you can get into the nitty gritty too, like faiths. I mean, I guess race, culture, culture of human society could include faiths, because certain faiths will have some icon that might be representational of that, and we wouldn't know any better. Well, we might know after the fact.
As preparation for this meeting, I Googled most offensive mascots to see what was out there.
Boy.
There was a minor league baseball team that was apparently the Arabs. And so, right. So, yeah, I mean, we do have to sort of, but I think if we took groups out, it would, and it's why I wanted to make sure I read all the suggestions yesterday. That would allow for things like the Quarrymen, which I think, right, wouldn't be, there are suggestions in there like the Guilford Granite. And the Quarrymen obviously connects to that history in the town. Obviously, things like the Patriots. I'm trying to think of other examples. I'm just going to walk away to grab the copy I'm printing out so I can make markups on this. I can still hear you. I'm taking the earpiece with me.
My concern of getting rid of a group of human beings opens us up to a lot of questionable ideas.
Yep.
You know, and just the fact that it leaves the door open is a little concerning, because then you kind of get into that, you know, whole ambiguity of, you know, just trying to determine, you know, whether who thinks what, you know.
Right.
I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I think it's probably safe to leave in there. But you know, to my point, the only thing that really comes out at me is just saying what we are allowing for and maybe getting rid of that.
So the way I have that paragraph now simply reads, school mascots shall not be an individual human being, a group of human beings, a race of human beings, or a specific culture of human society. It doesn't limit what they may be. I also thought it was really important, the paragraph that says that these will be school-based decisions and should be inclusive school decisions with student voice being paramount.
Yeah.
And again, that's taking from the Killingly situation. We do not want this to sort of become a regular board action or a town referendum or something decided at that level. I think it should be for kids to decide that they want to be the Lions. And I also don't think we should do it every year, right? Again, these should be sort of long-standing.
Right.
There's no suggestion that anybody wants to change any of the other ones at this time.
Okay.
Perhaps we can do something like after, in your third paragraph, school mascots shall be, but are not limited to, a representation of animals, mythical creatures, inanimate objects, just so that we're sort of suggesting our intent.
That's a good idea.
I like that.
Ourselves.
That's
Yeah,
better.
I'd rather
I think
not
that's
take
better
it
than
out.
striking it
Yeah.
out. Right.
I like that.
I like that better,
John,
Kristen.
about the leaving in the restrictions that we have on human beings, group of human beings. I just, like, even if we're using the quarrymen as an example, you know, I live down here in the quarry. I think it sounds awesome. Our house is actually the original quarryman's, the person who actually ran the quarry's home. So there's a lot of history with that for me, but I have no idea about quarrymen. I don't know if they were considered slaves. I don't know if they were, you know, you just never know what you're going to unfold. And I don't want to open ourselves to the same kind of conversation that we just had with the Indians. So I do think we're probably safer keeping in that language, just because you never know what you're, you know, I don't think any one of us is an expert.
Those good points, Kristen.
In this history.
That's a really good point. I mean, if in Kentucky some school wanted to be the coal miners, would that be in consider? And so yes, I think that's probably okay.
And the only other, so far, the only other point that I would maybe add is just in your second paragraph, I would add the word individual and just say the mascot shall be a decision made at the individual school level.
Yep.
Since each school has its own mascot.
Good.
And then one other thought, which I don't even know if I should ask it. Do you think that we need to add anything in here, or maybe it becomes its own section about how to change a mascot? Like if Mike Regan decides that he hates the raccoons, do we want to give any parameters about, you know, how to change something, or do you think that's just biting off more than we need to chew at this point in time?
So put in a process element.
Yeah.
I sort of worry about that because of the conversation over these last 10 years around the high school mascot, right? And so I also like, I mean, what would we say, that a petition with 10% of the population trigger? I mean, I
don't know.
Yeah. No, I do. I understand the reasoning for the question, but yes, I hesitate about putting something in to that point.
Well, in your fourth paragraph, Paul, you said, you know, the Guilford Public School System shall not maintain a mascot at the district level. The policy shall not be interpreted as a requirement for all Guilford schools to maintain a mascot. So it's leaving it open at the school level, I guess, to give them the freedom in the future. Like you're saying, they don't have to maintain a mascot. So if Adams decided we don't want a mascot anymore, they're free to remove that, I guess, is what we're saying. The officers do not maintain a mascot at the district level. So we're not maintaining the mascot at the district level. You know, there's been questions about who's going to pay for these changes? What's going to happen with uniforms? What's going to happen with the gym floor? So are we not maintaining the mascot? Like, I'm just with the GHS one, I'm wondering, like,
Yeah,
that's
so
why I'm
I
saying,
think,
are we getting a little ahead of ourselves? I just want to be careful.
yeah, and that word isn't there to mean financially maintain the mascot. That
Yeah.
word is there to say that we've got 7 individual school mascots. And if at some point we end up expanding into an 8th school, it would be up to that community to identify a mascot for that school. We don't have, like Madison does, we don't have one mascot that is the district mascot that overarches all of our schools. Madison only has the Tigers. They don't have individual mascots at different schools. And so that was what I was trying to speak to there.
Yep.
But again, you know, that
Maybe it should say just not maintain a singular mascot at the district
Sure.
level, or
Yep.
I don't know, just to clarify that. But to speaking to like procedure, I don't know if we'll come across this again, right? Given the mascots that we currently have, but it might be something to think about after we go through this process and see what we learn of it. And see if the methods we took were, you know, appropriate and worked.
Actually, that's a really good point. These policies are never finite. If we were to adopt just this much of the policy, we could keep rolling that piece around, and we could come back a year from now and say, you know what, we do want to refine this policy and say something about how do you change a mascot moving forward.
Yeah.
I mean, the pieces I'm thinking about, there's policy around naming of school buildings and portions of school buildings. And what that says is that somebody needs to bring forward a petition to the board, well, not a petition, but a request, a petition as in a request of the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed then forms a committee. The committee then looks at all the spaces and any suggested names and makes a determination. We've said that it rests at the school level. So I guess what that means is if a number of students approached the principal and said, we don't like the raccoons, we'd rather be something else, it would be at that level that would happen. But we don't have to feel like we've got this perfect today. We can always come back in 6 months or a year and revise this and add something to it at a later time. I do think that I
wonder if there's some value in seeing how this process goes for us with the high school and the community involvement. And then we'll have a template, you know, we'll learn, we'll say, yes, this is a really good way to take this, or let's tweak this, you know, in case in the future this comes up again.
Yeah.
And that's just my perspective. I'm not saying that's what we need to do.
Well,
but
that makes
was
a lot
just
of
my
sense.
No, I like that.
Okay.
Paul, what are the thoughts on having school lawyers look at this policy? Is that something that they should be okaying before we take this to the rest of the board?
Happy to do that. We don't have, who would we use, Jason? Would we ask Samaruga to look at it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess we could have, we could have, I mean, what's interesting is our attorneys tend to be a labor attorney, a special ed attorney, and then a contract attorney.
Right.
I would have to think about
Just
whose
two.
opinion. Yep, I'd have to think about whose opinion we would value on something like this.
Just a thought, you know, you know, just from the policy speak only, you know, and just to see if we're, you know, overstretching or not. So I think it's fine the way it is. I just wonder if it should have a legal look at it.
I know of somebody where we could get a free legal opinion. I know of an attorney who used to sit on this subcommittee who would probably be happy.
There we go.
who I'd be happy to run it by.
That sounds good.
What's interesting is I don't think we have any legal exposure. I don't think we're opening ourselves up to lawsuits in language on this topic, but I think that's a good caution. And then maybe Gary would have another name he'd recommend if he's uncomfortable doing I think
Okay.
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Well, I think it also,
So-
John's point about earlier about, are we missing something? You
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
Is there just something that in a word or a phrase we can put in that will be something that we just haven't thought of?
Or
And I
just,
don't
or
think-
just the wording of it, to Kristen's point, when she said, I can't remember,
Not limited to.
not
yes,
limited. It's that kind of speak that, they know how to do it.
It's already much better for this conversation. And as I pointed out before, as long as we don't mind the process rolling out at the high school in absence of policy, I don't see any reason to rush this. And I'll just continue to make sure that what we're doing at the high school is in alignment with the developing policy, even though it doesn't have to be. I'll make sure that whatever we're doing does end up matching whatever we codify as policy, even if we get there first. And
Right.
so I don't think there's a rush. I think taking our time and being thorough about this makes sense. And so what I have now is that the first paragraph stands unchanged except for the spelling correction, depending on which version you're looking at.
Mhm.
In the second paragraph, the first line reads, "The identification and adoption of a mascot shall be a decision made at the individual school level," and then the rest remains the same. And then in the third paragraph, it will read, "School mascots shall be, in most cases, representations of animals, mythical creatures, inanimate objects, or colors, although not limited to those," I need a word there, "to those names or something."
Paul, I think you can just say school mascots shall be representations or shall be not limited to something. Like if you put not limited to in that area, I don't think the sentence needs to.
Okay.
Agreed.
How about
Mascots
school mascots can, but shall not be limited
Right.
to,
can
Okay,
be,
there you go.
can
Yes.
be.
And then I'll just put in a positive in there. Yes,
Can be.
got it.
but shall not be limited to representation of animals. Yeah.
Got it. And then we will maintain the language about humans, groups of humans, races, all as is written. And in that last paragraph, it will simply read, "The Guilford Public School System shall not maintain a singular mascot at the district level," and the rest remains the same.
Yeah.
I,
What do you guys think about this last paragraph? Do you think that this is a necessity to keep this in? I mean, what if, for example, we come up with a new high school mascot that the town generally gets behind, and there is some push to do what Madison does and just have one mascot, or even something that's, Adams up or something like that, or Baldwin up, so that as kids are getting uniforms, they're starting to be the, I don't know, Jaguars at a younger age, and uniforms are staying the same. I just don't know if this is a necessary addition to put in policy or not.
Was there a reason to put it in the first place, Paul, other than just stating fact?
just sort of codifying where we are, right?
Yeah.
I was worried that, and there's a lot of misinterpretation of the current high school mascot, right? I've been contacted by a number of community members in the last several weeks, upset that we were changing the mascots for the youth football league and for the youth lacrosse league. And I said, we're not. That's not, those groups individually chose to align themselves with the imagery and the mascotry from the high school. They can choose to maintain that moving forward, right? We may continue to have youth leagues that continue to use that mascot or that moniker. So again, I was sort of putting it in there to codify what exists today, in an attempt to avoid complications. So that we don't buy uniforms at Adams that have the green on it, or the quarryman, or whatever the final decision is, right? That's not written on those uniforms. If it came out, it would leave room for, I don't think that Madison made a conscious decision to be the Tigers everywhere. I think it probably evolved over time. And so if we put it in there, it codifies the current status quo. If we take it out, it doesn't mean it changes overnight, but it leaves room for something like that to
Right.
occur over time. If
Right.
all of a sudden the new high school mascot are the Griffins, and Adams kids think that that's really cool and want their uniforms to have that logo on it, but to the earlier point, there's no process for how to do that, right? There's nothing in place that says, how do we decide to do away with the raccoon at Adams? I don't think it would be as emotional as the mascot at the high school was. I can't tell you what the history of the raccoon is. I don't know how long it's been there. I don't know. I don't know which is the right way to go on that.
Well, you do say in the first, line of the second paragraph, the identification and adoption of a mascot shall be a
Is a
decision
school.
made at the school level. So okay, I'm just looking at the last, I'm reading out loud, so not maintain mascot, singular mascot. Maybe it's just that one line, this policy shall not be interpreted as a requirement for all Guilford schools to maintain
Yeah.
a mascot.
You could strike the
Um,
first line, which doesn't
Right.
then,
Yeah.
it doesn't poke
Yeah.
something that we may not want to poke. That's totally fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, like everything we do, policies are written on word processors, not carved in stone. We can
Right.
always
Right. It can
make, right?
evolve. Yeah.
We can revisit this annually every 6 months, right? The board can go back and adjust it as often and whenever you choose to.
I think it's good.
Yeah. It's
All
a
right,
good kicking
so-
off point. Yeah, I'm happy with this.
And everybody is okay that there's no reason to rush this. I'll take this as we've marked it up. I will talk with Gary Kazin about it, get some recommendations from him about having other attorneys take a look at it. And we'll continue to see if there's anything else out there. We just haven't turned anything up in these last 6 weeks.
And Paul, thanks for drafting this. But yeah, it's a
Yes.
good, it really provided a focus for us for tonight.
I just thought we needed someplace to start. If we didn't have something on paper, we'd still be wrestling around the first sentence. So I just wanted to have
Right.
something on
Yes, we
paper.
would.
I think it's already better for the feedback. I really appreciate it.
And I think it was very good that the communication came from Julia regarding the next steps for the mascot. I think that was really important for the community to know that the acting principal was the one taking, of course, community input, but that it's a high school effort, because if it had come from us, it wouldn't have made any sense and it wouldn't have been appropriate. But I think it's been
Yep.
well received. Clearly, we're getting a lot of feedback. So.
And a lot of the emails are really enthusiastic and excited, and we're getting sort of pictures taken of things that elementary kids are drawing and sending to us. Lots of fun suggestions. And again, we wanted, if the policy says that it's a decision that will be made at the school level, then we want to model that by having Julia lead that process. So I will not be sitting in any of the committee meetings. I will not be casting a vote. It will be something that is being done at the school level and ultimately decided by students. But I know that we've got some of the suggestions are coming in from people who graduated 40 and 50 years ago. So I'm glad we didn't limit the whole process just to the current 4 years of students who are in the high school. I think it is bigger than that. And I think community members appreciate being invited in and having a voice here. I can probably guarantee you that whatever we settle on is not going to make everybody happy. Choosing one mascot for something this large, someone's going to think it's silly, or someone's going to, it's not, but hopefully it will be something that in time people will be able to rally around.
Absolutely. All right, so I guess what we'll ask to do then is to have this language revised.
I think we should be able to meet again as soon as a
Yeah.
week or 2 weeks. Yep.
Perfect.
And I'll have at least one attorney's opinion of it for you before we
Okay.
meet again with all the revisions that we suggested.
So do you want to schedule separate policy committee meetings, then we can vote to move it forward to the regular board, or do you want to just bring this to the,
I think it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it
Okay,
makes sense
perfect.
for us to
Okay.
talk again and look at
Mhm.
what we've done.
okay. So we'll try to schedule something before one of our special meetings in the next week or so. Okay. All right, I'll talk to,
That's perfect.
sorry about that. Okay, great.
I know
So-
our next regular scheduled policy meeting is not until September, I think, correct?
No, right. So we'll schedule a special meeting.
Right.
Because I
Probably
know we
before
have
one
a
of the
special,
extra Monday meetings, right?
right, next Monday we have one, we have the next 3 Mondays, we have meetings. So if you feel, ready for it for next week, please communicate that, and then we'll make sure it gets posted, by,
I think we should
I mean-
tentatively plan on that. I
Okay,
mean, it's
then we'll plan for that.
unless
Okay.
Gary is off grid for some reason, these
Right.
changes are essentially done. I'll have Gary take a look and we'll make one more dive into whether there's anybody out there who has a policy. I
Okay.
think, Jason, looking at some of the districts we know that did change recently is probably a really good idea if we haven't looked already. we'll take a look at some of those to see if they did anything like this, wrote policy after the fact.
Mhm.
CABE wasn't aware of anybody who had one, which I thought was kind of interesting, actually.
Do we need to stay within Connecticut? You know, do you feel with a policy? I mean, maybe Massachusetts has, you know, we might
Yep.
poke around a little further and find a district that,
Yeah, I Googled a bunch of different things and
okay,
nothing came up.
that's so interesting. Okay,
I'll try again.
Yep, but we will have it revised. We will have a legal opinion and we will see if we can turn up any other templates for you. And I don't see why we can't have all those ready for a week from tonight.
okay, great.
And if the special meetings have been at 7, so we wouldn't have to do 5, we could probably do 6 or even 6:30 because I think
Yeah.
this is,
Okay,
I think that would be great and I really appreciate it. I didn't want to wait till September. I appreciate you guys
No,
scheduling
no,
a
no,
special
no.
No
meeting.
problem.
it just is a good protective measure too, and going through this for the first time. I mean, we're kind of in literally uncharted territory, so it's important that we at least have something on paper to get us in the beginning stages of this. Like, I like the idea of it evolving over time, you know, after we see what happens with the high school mascot in the process and its successes or failures, and then we can hopefully craft something to add to this.
And again, learning from the Killingly experience, I don't want to have it
Mhm.
stay wide open and you know, maybe end up flailing around in the future. So to have a policy moving forward to me just makes sense.
Okay, good.
Great.
So are there any
Thanks,
other
everyone.
comments anybody has before we adjourn the meeting? No? Okay, so could I have a motion to conclude the policy committee meeting?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Thanks, John. Okay, so this meeting is concluded and we will hopefully reconvene in 1 week and go from there.